everybody. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I'm Lee Camp, bringing you sanity in an insane world. How is everybody out there? A lot of big news. Ukraine has already fired the long-range missiles that we all feared they would fire. We got leaked documents showing secret British secret ops inside Ukraine, hoping to continue the fighting no matter what happens. You've got a new study that shows that U.S. streets are equivalent to conflict zones around the world. All of that and much more, all that positive news and much more coming your way. Please click thumbs up and throw in a comment and say hello to all the other amazing human beings. Clearly, you are all amazing human beings, or, you wouldn't be here. You're here because you're amazing. Hello to everybody. And I'm adding to the fun, Jafar Khan.
How's it going, everyone? Glad to be a part of Lee Camp's Super Happy Fun Optimism Hour with all the great news we have to cover today.
Now, could you say it with a little more enthusiasm, please?
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not matching your upbeat tone over here. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the fact that I covered yesterday that Biden had or whoever has their hand up Biden's ass has approved Ukraine's use of U.S. long-range missiles into Russia, putting us closer and closer to the brink of nuclear war. I mean, it can't get any closer, honestly. And now they've used them. That's the new update. Reuters is reporting Ukraine hits Russia with U.S. ATACMS missiles for the first time. Russia said its forces shot down 5 of 6 of the missiles, which were fired at a military facility in the Bryansk region. Debris of one hit the facility. Ukraine said it had struck Russian arms depot around 110 kilometers inside Russia in an attack that caused secondary explosions. Moscow has described their potential use as an escalation that would make Washington a direct combatant in the war and prompt its retaliation. Because, and as I mentioned yesterday, these are U.S. missiles. These are missiles that the U.S. needs to train Ukrainians to use. Quite possibly, you've got Americans advising them as they're firing them. It takes U.S. Intelligence to aim them and come up with the targeting systems. And so the only thing that's Ukrainian about it is perhaps the finger on the button, but everything else is American. And you could see why Russia might consider this being the U.S. involved directly in this proxy war.
Yeah, getting hit with an American missile might feel a little American.
And chances are, knowing the United States, we have American flags painted all over it. We're not generally quiet about the American flag. Military experts say using the U.S. missiles to attack positions at such depth in Russia can help Ukraine defend a pocket of Russian territory it has captured as a bargaining chip, but is not likely to have a decisive impact on the course of the 33-month-old war. So that's even like U.S. military experts saying, oh, yeah, this is not likely to change anything. Not likely to change anything, but it puts us closer to nuclear war, so why not do it?
Yeah, so you mean not likely to change anything on the ground, but geopolitically does make things much, much, much more terrifying.
Exactly, which is where the U.S. likes to go. Moscow has said such weapons cannot be used without direct operational support from the U.S., and therefore their use would make Washington a direct participant. On Tuesday, Putin signed a new nuclear doctrine apparently intended as a warning to Washington. It lowers the threshold under which Russia might use atomic weapons. I feel like again and again, Russia's asked to be the adult in the room that doesn't spiral this out of control.
Yeah, and Biden is throwing a temper tantrum on the way out, spilling his little sippy cup all over the place. So his parents have to clean it up when he leaves.
Yeah, and I think it seems like the main purpose of it is that Trump despite being a despicable human being, seems to want to end this conflict and is already discussing with the parties about ending it at the diplomacy table, as many of us said should have happened on day one. And it seems that Biden and his goons, as opposed to Trump's goons, want to make this as messy as possible so that it will continue.
He doesn't want World War III to start. What a classic Putin puppet that guy is.
Yeah, I know in this regard. And already countries in NATO, Sweden recently joined NATO. Sweden and some other countries are sending pamphlets out to their people telling them what to do for nuclear war. Like what to do when Russia attacks. As if this latest step is Russia's fault when clearly this is the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But I always find it funny when Sweden is the other countries. They're like, well, yeah, we're going to keep supporting everything the U.S. is doing, but we're also going to send out these pamphlets telling everybody to get ready to kiss their ass goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, on the flip side, there might be some nice Halliburton bomb shelter contracts to be placed all over NATO countries. I'm sure they'll find a way to.
Oh, come on! I'm sure in Sweden it'll be IKEA bombs.
Yeah, I forgot.
Bunkers.
Yeah, they could assemble them themselves.
IKEA bomb bunkers is just about the dumbest idea ever created, considering most IKEA falls apart without a bomb.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but it would be very fun to go to your local IKEA and try out the model bomb shelters while eating a plate of meatballs.
That's absolutely true. Eamon, thank you for the donation. Thank you for the solidarity. Eamon says the era of American mask off moments. This is the era. Yeah, absolutely. Putin has been warning of this for decades. America has been proving Putin right. We're here now. Yeah, it does feel like there's a lot of masking off that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm. It's like a damn Future song up in here. He has a song called Mask Off.
And I'm the old man who goes, Future is a person?
Future is a time concept, Joffer. What the heck are you? You're off this live stream. No
Next, you're going to tell me that The Weeknd wrote songs.
That was a good one.
So, in the same area of geopolitics, Germany has just revealed that 2 of their Baltic Sea cables have been severed. They're saying it is sabotage. It's the odds of it happening accidentally are essentially impossible. And of course, nowhere in this New York Times article does it mention, and the New York Times vaguely points the finger at Russia. Obviously, Russia must be severing these cables in Germany. And nowhere in the New York Times article do they mention that the U.S., by blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, basically said industrial sabotage of the highest level is just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Is just go ahead, even with countries that you're supposedly not at war with, because technically we're not at war with Germany or Russia, which is what the pipeline connected. We're in a proxy war with Russia, but we blew up a multi-billion-dollar industrial, infrastructure work that was partially our allies. It was Germany's.
Yeah, well, of course, New York Times wouldn't bring that up. If they were to bring it up, they would say, first, Russia blew up their own pipeline.
Right.
Now they're cutting Germany's cables. What is it with these guys going underwater and blowing shit up?
Right. And this created the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline created a precedent, at least a recent precedent, that, it's just fine. Just whatever of an enemy's infrastructure you want to blow up and pretend you didn't do it, totally cool.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the New York Times, wants everyone to have the memory of a goldfish, and you're not supposed to think anything happened beyond a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
But so speaking of keeping this proxy war in Ukraine going, no matter what happens, no matter who enters the presidency in a few months, there are leaked documents covered by Kit Klarenberg. We might have him on the show soon. But leaked documents in the gray zone about a British military cell basically a secret op inside Ukraine to keep Ukraine fighting. And this is a pretty bombshell leak. Of course, is not going to be covered by your mainstream media because they don't want to talk about the fact that Ukraine is involved in this proxy war. Emails and internal documents reviewed by the Gray Zone reveal details of a cabal of British military and intelligence veterans which plotted to escalate and prolong the Ukraine proxy war at all costs. Convened under the direction of British Ministry of Defense in the immediate aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine 2022, the cell referred to itself as Project Alchemy. As British leadership sabotaged peace talks, which I've covered a lot on this show, this all could have been over within a month of it starting if the British, of course, they were acting at the behest of the United States, but hadn't made sure there were no peace talks. As British leadership sabotaged peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow, the cell put forward an array of plans to keep Ukraine fighting by imposing strategic dilemmas, costs, and frictions upon Russia. Frictions is a nice euphemism, you got to say. When you're getting shot in the head and you're like, that was an interesting friction.
I think the this British cell just is a big fan of your show and your slogan, and they were like, you know what? Keep fighting, Ukraine, literally forever. This is your fault.
Absolutely is my fault. I'm the first to put forward the idea of continuing to fight.
Yeah, you gotta stop. I told you to stop putting out those Facebook ads for British spies. Look what you've done.
Carefully targeted to those in London, part of special forces. The secret cell even put forward a plan to, quote, aggressively pursue and dismantle independent media outlets, including the Gray Zone. Boy, does this sound like that some of this has been happening? Through an aggressive campaign of legal harassment and online censorship, so they would be forced to close. The incendiary blueprints were fed to the highest levels of the British state and were apparently well received. Some of Project Alchemy's most extreme recommendations have already been implemented, often with calamitous results. These include the cell's proposal to strike Crimea's Kerch Bridge. You remember when that happened, a year and a half or more ago, which prompted a Russian escalation that saw punishing attacks on Ukraine's electricity infrastructure. Alchemy also envisioned the construction of a secret Gladio-style army of Ukrainian partisan fighters to carry out assassination, sabotage, and terror missions behind enemy lines. Operation Gladio was a CIA and MI6 effort, also called Left Behind units, right after World War II, in which the U.S. and Britain left stockpiles of guns and munitions and things. And back then, even more so than right now, in Europe, it was not always easy to find heavy artillery. So leaving stockpiles had a very significant impact on what people were capable of doing. And, back then you couldn't buy a gun on Amazon in Europe. So, but
dark days.
Yeah. And then these Left Behind units, which were often comprised of, white supremacist neo-Nazis, those who wish the Nazis had won, they were involved in a lot of anti-communist, but also just anti-leftist actions and violence. The prime minister of Italy was murdered by a Left Behind unit. And then some believe that Sweden's leftist prime minister, Olof Palme, might have been killed by a Left Behind unit. And anyway, Britain is missing these good old times of far right nationalist white supremacists having, quiet secret ops in countries, specifically in Ukraine this time.
Yes. Make Nazis armed again.
Make Nazis not war? No, that doesn't work. Some of Project Alchemy's most extreme recommendations. I already did that one. The British spooks who gathered around Project Alchemy reasoned that the longer the proxy war continued, the more Russian President Putin's credibility at home and abroad drops and his ability to fight NATO is degraded. Yeah, he clearly is just desperate. Project Alchemy's gambit has clearly backfired as Putin remains popular within Russia, while a crumbling Ukrainian army loses territory by the day, despite constant rearming by the West. But the war planners in London remain staunchly committed to escalation. And I think there's a big question mark as to whether these left behind units and this secret op will continue no matter what type of peace plan is put in place after Trump gets into office. But one other detail I wanted to show here was the going after of well, a couple of things, but going after of independent media. To accomplish the balkanization of Russia, Project Alchemy's plotters took inspiration from Operation Gladio, which I've already detailed, a section detailing potential discrete operations in Alchemy's strategy paper, which stressed the need to intervene in every way except officially.
Intervene in every way except intervening.
Except for the non-criminal version.
Exactly.
Except for the one where we actually tell publicly that we are intervening. Yeah. Explicitly recommended stay behind Gladio handbooks, partisan pamphlets, which would be updated for the information age. So literally they're saying in this, we want to be like Operation Gladio, which was a completely internationally illegal, disgusting, immoral arming of far-right lunatics that ultimately killed one or two prime ministers. Awesome.
Yeah, wow.
To prepare the British public for the coming storm, so basically they say that they knew Russia would respond economically and that it would harm Britain and the Brits would have trouble, which they have. I mean, economics in Britain, the economy in Britain is not doing great. On top of that, energy is more expensive than ever. Project Alchemy's plotters proposed what they blandly described as information operations. That's called propaganda. But which could be more accurately described as a blend of domestic state propaganda and malign attacks on disruptive media outlets. Disruptive meaning those who tell the truth. The task they outlined not only included dismantling Russian disinfo like RT and Sputnik, but also targeting critical independent media like the Gray Zone. Here's a quote. A number of actions can be undertaken against these outlets. The most obvious is legal, since the content of these media outriders is frequently in contravention of media law in the UK, US, and EU. And what they're referring to is like bullshit laws where, you know, Richard Medhurst was arrested and held for 24 hours, basically for telling the truth about Gaza, that kind of thing. Aggrieved parties currently tend to ignore libel defamation by these outlets. Were they to aggressively pursue these outlets, it is likely they would be forced to close. The Gray Zone, it was claimed, had thus far managed to obscure its funding. So Gray Zone is not funded by Russia or Iran or China, but Britain especially can't stand them. I mean, the U.S. doesn't like them either, but there's been a lot of leaks to the Gray Zone of internal British, operations and things. And so Britain really despises Gray Zone or certain ruling elite in Britain. And they have gone after them even more so than the United States have, including arresting Kit Klarenberg for 5 hours, which was the maximum that could hold him. So they claim the funding was obscured. A suggestion that this outlet is covertly funded by Russia or some other enemy state, which is completely false. The paranoid fantasies, and that lie was also published in the Washington Post.
And it's funny because it's such a projection, you know, like they're out here like funding all these Nazis and stuff. So they're like, well, what state is funding them? How are they doing their work?
Yeah. And they also can't imagine. Thank you, Teresa, for the donation. Solidarity. And they also can't imagine that outlets like Gray Zone or Mint Press or what have you are just telling the truth because they like want to tell the truth. It has to be
angle here.
Yeah, it has to be that some evil Russian or Chinaman has made them do it. It can't possibly be that these people are just devoted to like knowing your reality.
Mhm.
Anyway, he says the paranoid fantasies of British intelligence may explain why this journalist, meaning himself, Kit Clarenberg, was quizzed on the subject by British counter-terror police when detained and interrogated at Luton International Airport in 2023. And, quizzed is a nice way, really, of saying this. This is 5 hours of being
Quizzed.
detained, not knowing if you're going to ever get out of prison again, having all your devices stolen, and being harangued and harassed. And it also, a lot of journalists get done with that and they're like, maybe this isn't the career for me. Like it creates a chilling effect, which is part of the goal as well.
Yeah, they have families and stuff,
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I wanted to cover this important leak that has come forward about how unhinged Britain is. It is nice to see that there really is a special relationship between Britain and the United States in terms of us both being equally unhinged
Mhm.
and, working
I mean,
together.
Yeah, I mean the Brits are the OG. I mean we're the US, we're the students who become the master, but you gotta give credit where credit is due.
And of course, this is horrifying. Hopefully, these left behind units, these gladios, don't continue to murder people after a so-called peace plan. But who knows what they are capable of. Okay, let's move on to some more stories. I want to, for a moment, talk about, and I might end up doing another segment on this later, but how hilariously deluded the Democrats are in why they lost the election, and how funny it is to watch these segments where they try and parse what could have possibly happened.
It was all these leftist Muslim trans people coalescing together as one giant voter who didn't vote for them.
And trying to figure out, and I have an amazing clip of Joy Reid. Thank you, Kevin O'Neill. Big donation. Really appreciate it. Solidarity. Strange times is absolutely accurate. Strange times. But we're lucky to be here. How exciting of a time is it to be alive in the world right now? We could have been here during boring times. But anyway, here is Joy Reid, one of the faces of MSNBC, who is just, full-throated Democrat. And here is a quick, it's like 20 seconds, analysis trying to figure out what went wrong in the election.
And so what you've seen in the last couple of weeks, if this is an audition for managing a complex organization like the United States, Kamala Harris has passed the audition flawlessly. This has been, in many ways, a perfect campaign. Barely any time to put it together. But just as a managerial matter, it's been brilliantly done. And so what you've seen in the last...
A perfect campaign. She lost.
It was a perfect campaign.
If you search real closely, you might find one imperfection with the campaign: the fact that it lost and it did not work.
Well, there's also the fact that no one ever voted for Kamala Harris to ever be in any of the positions she's in.
No. She's had chances to get votes in the past.
She was not voted into vice president. Now, no one is, but she's not voted into that. And she was, by the way, that primary where she was selected for vice president, she lost horrifically. And she was not voted to be the presidential candidate. So that could be a bit of the problem with the campaign. There is that.
Yeah, how many votes did she get in 2020? Like in the primaries, like 3? 4?
And I thought it was 4.5.
Might have been 4.5. Yeah.
Then there's the fact that the Democrats have failed to represent the American people in like any way over the past 4 years. There's been a borderline zero effort to actually help people in a real way. Instead, hundreds of billions of dollars are sent to Ukraine to bomb people that the vast majority of the American people say they want that proxy war to be over. They do not support it continuing. Sending missiles every 36 hours to a genocide in Gaza, where you have most Americans, especially younger Americans, not supporting that at all. There's a long list of ways that the Democrats have been horrific to the American people, not representing anything that they claim to represent, and yet this was the perfect campaign.
Yeah, like Republicans lie, but at least they offer, Republicans will be like, life is hard because of immigrants, which is a lie. But then Democrats will be like, life is actually not hard. You're actually wrong if you think that.
Yeah, they're different kinds of lies. They're like Donald Trump. I'd say one of the biggest lies he told throughout the entire campaign was he pretended that Kamala Harris was some other human being than she is, and that she's leftist and Marxist and loves Palestinians, and so they have their own kind of
a Palestinian, right? Something like that.
So the Republicans have their own kind of lies, but they then act on that false reality that they created. Like, he will help continue to bomb Palestinians. Like, he will try his best to deport as many immigrants as he can. Whereas the Democrats, it's the reverse of what they claimed. Like, they somewhat claim to care a little more about immigrants, at least than the Republicans, and yet they deported more immigrants than Trump did by a large margin. So it's like, yes, there are lies on massive amounts of lies on both sides, but the Democrats are the ones who come out and do the exact opposite of everything they claim to sometimes stand for or whatever. But
yeah, and it's interesting and strange with the Latino vote this election, because like you said, normally Democrats will lie and say they care about migrants, but this time around we had Kamala trying to copy Trump and trying to be like, no, we're also going to be hard on the border. And so it's like, yeah, why would so many Latino voters vote for Trump if you're pretty much offering the exact same thing? Right. Well, then you might as well vote for the guy who thought of the idea in the first place than like this cheap copy.
Well, yeah, exactly. If you're getting the same stance from the two sides, Kamala and Donald Trump, then why is it all these Latinos are supposed to flood out into the voting booths to support, I don't know, the same shit? Like,
exactly. I want to be deported by this weird lady with a cackling laugh. It's like, no, go to the original guy, the guy who at least has some charisma, who is a liar, but you know what I mean? At least he came up with that. At least he gets credit for that.
Yeah, he has a faux populism that a lot of people buy into, whereas she didn't even have that. He is able to lie and grab a lot of people. They somehow appreciate that. They view him as daddy, and daddy's going to save us. She never even, she wasn't even able to grab people with lies. She couldn't do it with lies or with truth. Okay, I might, depending on the amount of time, I might do another segment on MSNBC laughably trying to figure out why Dems lost the election. But for the moment, let's move over to Israel, ongoing genocide. And even by saying that word, I ensure that this video will get many, many, many fewer views than it would otherwise. But I can't stop myself because it's kind of just reality. But this is kind of a big news story because Human Rights Watch, in some areas, they are correct, but often, or at least at key times, they have also been used as kind of a tool of U.S. and Western hegemony. They're more than willing to go along with hilariously made up studies that China's committing genocide against Uyghurs or things like that. So they're often used for Western hegemony. However, even they have decided, apparently after a year of genocide, it's a bit too much. and they have said that Israel is committing ethnic cleansing. That's from Human Rights Watch. Let me give a refresher of the numbers. 43,736 killed in Gaza, at least 103,000 wounded in Gaza. 59% are women, children, and elderly. That was as of October 21st. And that, of course, the 43,000 number, of course, does not count famine and disease, which probably brings it up to 200,000. 783 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank, which if Israel's goal here is to get hostages and get Hamas, Hamas is not in the West Bank. So why are you murdering everybody in the West Bank? But they can't explain that. That 783 includes 146 children, 3,386 Lebanese killed, and more than 14,400 wounded by Israeli forces since October 8th. 2023. Israel revised its estimate of the October 7th death toll down to 1,189. Many of those were killed by Israel. The Israeli army recognizes the death of 890 Israeli soldiers and the injury of 5,000 since October 7th. Okay, so here's Human Rights Watch. Israel is committing, quote, systematic, quote, widespread displacement of Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. The international human rights group, Human Rights Watch, said in a report on Wednesday, according to the report, Israel's actions may amount to a crime against humanity. The group dismissed Israeli claims about Palestinian fighters hiding among civilians, which, by the way, even if it were true, hey, there's a Hamas fighter in a hospital, it's still illegal, immoral, and revolting to bomb a hospital. It doesn't.
Yeah, like literally every single action movie we had growing up, we watched growing up, ended with like the bad guy holding, you know what I mean, holding a lady or a kid to a kid's head, and the good guy never once just shot all of them and then movie over with a thumbs up, right? But that is. Right. Even in Israel's fantasy of being the good guy, that is their version of them being a good guy. It's just mowing down everyone.
Right. The James Bond villain has a gun to an innocent person's head, and they just bomb him.
Exactly.
Yeah, that never happened. The group dismissed Israeli claims. They're saying, quote, there is no plausible imperative military reason to justify Israel's mass displacement of nearly all of Gaza's population, often multiple times, indicating that from the first days of the hostilities, senior officials in the Israeli government and the war cabinet have declared their intent to displace the Palestinian population of Gaza. That's another thing, is many top Israeli officials have said over and over again in various forms their genocidal intent, their ethnic cleansing intent, their intent to take over Gaza. They haven't hidden it very well. And so anyway, you can add Human Rights Watch to the list of people calling this ethnic cleansing.
Wikipedia just described it as a genocide as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a fight amongst the editors. That's always funny when they try and go back and forth over.
Yeah, I think it was Mint Press. Might have not been Mint Press, but that's kind of how they described it. Was a year of infighting amongst the editors, but they've come out and they list it as a genocide.
That's good to hear. About time. Thank you, Teresa, for mentioning that Matthew Ho is there. Matthew Ho, a friend of mine, friend of the show, and he's not in Gaza. He's outside Gaza, but he has basically gone up to the border fence and done writing and reports from there. And I haven't read them all, but I did see he was talking about how disgusting it was because he saw a group of Israeli school children that had been brought on a field trip to basically look out on Gaza and cheer on the genocide, which is a level of indoctrination that boggles the mind.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much for everybody leaving comments. The comments always help fight the algorithms. And of course, the super chats help, all that stuff. Thank you guys for supporting the show, even as we fight crazy suppression. Another interesting story about Israel. So I was away and I didn't cover it much, but the there was that like crazy propaganda bullshit story in Amsterdam trying to claim it was anti-Semitic attacks and it was actually attacks by Israelis as opposed to the reverse. And video evidence has proven that this was Israelis, like mob violence.
Oh yeah, anti-Semitism's out of control. You can't even chant "Death to Arabs" at a soccer match anymore.
I know. How many freedoms are they going to take away from us, huh? How many fucking freedoms?
It's fucked up, Lee.
But Electronic Intifada was accidentally emailed by someone who contributes to the New York Times, and somehow they were accidentally copied on it. The New York Times.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, the New York Times killed an investigation of the Israeli hooligans. In internal email reveals, the New York Times killed the investigation by one of its own reporters into Israeli mob violence in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
In an internal Times email inadvertently shared with Electronic Intifada, Dutch reporter Christian Triebert explained to a manager that he had pitched a visual investigation I was conducting into the events, basically looking over video and figuring out who was at fault for this mob violence. Unfortunately, the story was killed. I regret that the planned moment-by-moment visual investigation was not further pursued. This has been very frustrating, to say the least, he wrote. The email was addressed to senior Times manager, Charlie Statlander, a former senior press officer for the U.S. National Security Agency and the U.S. Army. That's who's running the Times. Triebert appeared interested in carrying out reporting that would set the record straight, remediating the false narrative insistently advanced by his own newspaper that the Israeli fans were victims of mob violence motivated by anti-Jewish hatred. The correspondence between Triebert and Statlander on Friday was triggered by the Electronic Intifada's request for comment regarding the paper's highly misleading reporting of Israeli mob violence. The paper... Apparently, New York Times continually claimed that this was violence against Jews as opposed to the reverse.
Pogrom. Everyone kept using the word pogrom. It was insane.
Yeah. There is still precisely zero evidence that even one anti-Semitic attack took place in Amsterdam, let alone a pogrom that Israeli government officials immediately claimed had happened. The Times had come under fire for using a video of Israeli football hooligan violence in Amsterdam last week to claim the exact opposite of what the video showed. The Times claimed footage shot by a Dutch photojournalist showed anti-Semitic attacks on Israelis, even though it actually showed Israeli mob violence on a Dutch citizen. For several days, the footage was attached to the top of the paper's November 8th report about events in Amsterdam. On Tuesday, the paper finally issued a correction after the video's creator, Dutch photojournalist Annette de Graaf, publicly condemned international media for mislabeling her video as evidence of anti-Semitic attacks against Israeli football supporters. So they left this up for days, claiming the video showed the opposite of what it showed. This is New York Times for you. And then when they finally are kind of like forced into issuing a correction because it just gets too bad, they then issue the correction or a slight correction at a time that no one's paying attention to it anymore.
And well, just the fact that they accidentally emailed electronic Intifada of all. I guess it's like, you ever have that thing where you're talking shit about someone and then you accidentally send it to that person because your wires get crossed? Was they in the email just like, as long as Electronic Intifada doesn't get a hold of this investigation, whoops, our bad.
Yeah, it's possible it was a Freudian slip where, I mean, obviously this journalist was complaining to his editor, so he was kind of pissed off, and maybe there was a bit of a Freudian slip there, letting them know about it.
Hilarious.
Thank you, Jason, for the comments, and good to see you back on Facebook. Well, I hate to tell you, it's not actually back on Facebook. I am on Facebook with so-called 330,000 followers, but they don't actually show it to anyone. So when someone actually sees something on Facebook, they go, "Oh my God, you're back." No, you just got lucky one day that you were the one.
You're the little brother with a controller, but it's not plugged in.
Yeah, that's my Facebook. That's a good description of my Facebook. It's just a controller without a cord.
Yeah, and Meta is your mean big brother who won't let you do any moves or play.
Okay, let's move on from the genocide for a moment. And everybody, it'd be awesome if you could join up at leecamp.net if you feel like you're getting 38 cents worth out of this episode, because it is 38 cents an episode, $6 a month, and you get extra bonus segments and everything. That's my locals page. Scroll down and become a subscriber. You could also sign up at patreon.com/leecamp. I don't focus on that one as much, but you can do that as well if you'd like. Would be amazing. And my new podcast is called Just Comedy, and it is just my comedy segments. So episode 6 is coming out probably later today of just my comedy segments, and I'm trying to get 100 5-star reviews on Spotify, and we're at 88. So 12 of you could change this world.
Only you could.
Only you can do it. It's called Just Comedy. Look up Just Comedy with Lee Camp. And while I'm on the topic, Jeff, remind everybody where they can follow your work.
Oh yeah, just I'm mostly on Instagram and TikTok for now. I'm working on a couple projects, but I'll let y'all know once those are available. But for now, Joffrey Khan, Instagram, TikTok, try to make funny videos about all the terrible things happening in the world.
Okay, I found this article pretty incredible because the U.S., one of the things we love to kind of, it's like we brag about it, but it's also just kind of naturally known, is that we are clearly better than all of these other countries that are torn apart by conflict, war zones.
Conflicts, all these random conflicts.
Just conflict, war zones. There's so much death. It's scary to walk down the street. We are just naturally better. I mean, it hardly even needs to be said. It's just, you just know it. We are better than all these awful conflict countries. This was in the Washington Post. Gun death rates in some U.S. states are actually, they say comparable, but actually in some examples, they are worse than so-called conflict zones.
Wow.
The rate of firearm deaths in several U.S. states is similar to places around the world that are battling civil unrest or bloody gang wars. The report was published Wednesday by the Commonwealth Fund, an independent research group, found the overall rate of firearm deaths in Mississippi, for example, was twice that of Haiti.
Wow. Wow, I can't believe the CIA is arming all these people in Mississippi. I mean, they really need to get their grubby hands out of our local affairs here in the U.S.
Yeah. But like our newscast, if you watch a newscast about Haiti, it is like, oh my God, it's end of days. Everyone's just getting murdered. You can't walk down the street or you're shot in the head.
Oh yeah, they're just having machete fights out in the open.
Yeah, and Mississippi is actually twice as deadly. And that's just one example. Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama all have higher firearm death rates than Mexico, where rival drug cartels are engaged in bloody conflict. Obviously, it depends on the area of Mexico. Plenty of people love certain areas of Mexico, and then other areas, there is a lot of drug cartel conflict and death. Montana's death rate from guns is higher than Colombia, where drug trafficking is rife. A lot of the drug trafficking in Colombia, we help make sure that happens. Wyoming, Arizona, and Oklahoma all ranked above Brazil. Suburban New Jersey has a higher gun death rate than Nicaragua, Mali, and Djibouti.
Suburban New Jersey. I think that's the first non-red state that we got here.
True. And this is just counting gun death. This is not counting opioid deaths, but to me, this just like it yet again shows that the myth of like America is so blatantly fake on just
Mhm.
like all levels. We're told, if I feel like if you were like a CNN watcher and you were asked about Nicaragua, you would just go, oh my God, everybody's getting murdered there, right? Whereas Nicaragua it was recently found to be the #1 country where their citizens feel at peace compared to every other country in the world.
Wow.
Colombia obviously has a lot of issues, but apparently they're not murdering people as much as Oklahoma. Uh,
Hmm.
it's kind of crazy the fake world that we Americans live in
Yeah,
terms of.
those are deaths of conflict, Lee. Over here, these are deaths of freedom. That's just
That's very true.
that's just
Either freedom or outdoor barbecues, but
yeah,
one or
yeah.
the other. But another thing, which of course the Washington Post will get to, is they'll never get to the root cause of why is it that there's so much gun death in America. It's not just the fact, like I like to talk about core reality, getting down to core reality.
Mhm.
Often there's multiple levels, and the surface reality is there's lots of guns, and that's why we have gun death. Yes, there are lots of guns, and so in countries without guns, you are not going to have as much gun death. That is very true. You can dig down a little deeper. You also wouldn't have a lot of gun death if you didn't have mass inequality. Like the gun deaths go with horrific inequality. These things go hand in hand. And the U.S. has some of the most gut-wrenching inequality in the world, even compared to many countries in Europe that we kind of consider pretty similar. And you wouldn't have near this level of gun death and gang violence and et cetera without this level of inequality.
Yeah, definitely. And somewhere in there, I would add a layer of just not being able to fight the gun lobby because we don't have a real democracy in here in this country, and
That's very true.
the population doesn't get its wishes, which is just regular ass gun reform.
That's very true. There's essentially zero democracy in America, and hopefully some people are waking up to that. The 2014 Princeton study showed that nothing happens in Congress that does not align with corporate America, and corporate America is there's powerful gun corporations that want to sell as many guns as possible, and that 2014 study has only gotten worse. It's not gotten any better. So, yes, there's zero democracy in America. Also, so far this year, there have been 24 mass killings with guns in the United States. Sometimes these numbers are a bit confusing to people because you'll hear that there's a mass shooting a day in America, which is true, but mass shootings are different than mass killings. Mass shootings is obviously someone opening fire on a group of people. Mass killings means that it's got to be 4 people or more died during it. So luckily, most mass shootings don't end in that many people dying. But
So
globally,
you're saying, Lee, you're saying that if we had a day in the U.S. where we had one mass shooting, that's actually a good day.
yes, we had only one.
If it wasn't a mass killing, if it was just a mass
Yes.
shooting, that's a good day in America.
Yes. So my solution to this is if we just made the aims, the targeting of each gun slightly off,
Mhm.
it'd probably be better. Fewer people would die.
Yeah, instead of taking away people's freedoms, let's just get people better at zigzagging. I mean, we need physical education here. That's the problem.
Zigzag training is
Zigzag training, yeah.
absolutely important. Globally, the United States ranks in the 93rd percentile for overall firearm mortality, the 92nd percentile, meaning we're almost the top of firearm mortality. We're almost the top of firearm mortality among children and teenagers, and we are 96th percentile for a firearm mortality among women.
Wow. I mean, if that was an SAT score, we'd have a full ride wherever we wanted to be.
It's a pretty solid SAT score, absolutely.
Yeah.
But anyway, I need to remember this there's certain articles and certain studies you got to remember when you're in a debate with someone about other countries and why America is not better. And I feel like this is an important one to remember. We're not actually, in many states in the United States, we're not actually having fewer of our people murdered on a daily basis.
Yeah. I'd rather get shot by ISIS than just a mass shooting. I mean, come on. I want some kind of organization behind it at least.
I mentioned, speaking of how the U.S. sucks, I mentioned opioid deaths a minute ago, which are still horrific. However, there has been a, quote, historic drop in U.S. overdose deaths that has accelerated as fentanyl crisis is easing. And this is A, good news, but B, like less good news than they seem to want to say. Like, I feel like these headlines are like jumping up and down, like historic easing of, you know what the historic easing is? It's still 97,000 fatal overdoses this year.
Wow.
Or last year. That's down roughly 14.5% from the year earlier, which is a unprecedented drop. Public health officials say the drop translates into more than 16,000 lives saved. So obviously, great news, 16,000 lives saved, but 97,000 fatal overdoses is not like, I don't think it's something to jump up and down with enthusiasm about. Prior to 2023, drug deaths have spiraled upward, climbing at times by 30% a year. It peaked at 111,000. Some are crediting better addiction healthcare and widespread use of the opioid overdose reversal drug naloxone, which, yes, I think those things are important, and they have been advertising the overdose reversal drug. Also, researchers are saying there's less potent fentanyl on the streets. But then it says high death rates in recent years may also mean fewer vulnerable people living with addiction. Yeah, it's like, sadly, it could be that a lot of the most risky people are no longer with us, or people that were at high risk. But anyway, this is good news, and also maybe not as good news as they want to pretend it is. 97,000 is still utterly insane. And then, as with the last stories I said, you know, getting down to a deeper level of reality, this also comes down to, which they won't, NPR won't mention, mainstream media won't mention. This also has is definitely connected to inequality, hard times, hard lives. You know, often the places with the most opioid deaths, I have friends in West Virginia, which I believe is the worst state for this. It's often some of the poorest states, poorest areas of the country that are dealing with this the most. And of course, they also don't mention that corporate America created this opioid crisis by acting like their opioid pills were not addictive when they definitely were. So, yeah, all of that gets left out in these articles.
Definitely. I mean, corporate America fed them the drugs, but corporate America also shipped out all the jobs from these places that started creating the conditions to lead to deaths of despair like this. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the kind of deeper level understanding that you will never get from your mainstream media, even when they're not just blatantly lying to you. Okay. Here's an article about one of Trump's picks, RFK Jr.
All right, thanks. We're going to lighten the mood a little bit. After our Deaths of Despair segment.
Lighten the mood for a little RFK humor. Yeah. But I find it funny why they're nervous about RFK is not why you might think. So this says this is NPR. Some in the U.S. farm industry are alarmed by Trump's embrace of RFK Jr. Now, RFK is one of the only people, this is one of the positive things I said about him. He's one of the only people to criticize factory farming, corporate farming. Corporate farming is both disgusting and just violently awful for the environment. But it's also awful for Americans. Like your average American who owned a farm and then gets bought out by a corporate farming entity generally has their lives destroyed. Like they've gone from maybe having a somewhat profitable farm to being gutted. So it's not just disgusting. Factory farming isn't just disgusting for the animals. It's also for the humans. But that's not what this article's upset about. No, they just think RFK Jr. is not going to, he's anti farmers or something. President-elect Donald Trump won farm country by wide margins in the election, with rural voters helping fuel his return. But some farmers, economists, analysts, and others in the agriculture business are voicing alarm over Trump's plans that disrupt America's $1.5 trillion food industry. That's a $1.5 trillion food industry that is destroying our planet.
Yeah, killing us slowly.
Trump moved this past week to put RFK Jr. in charge of the Department of Health and Human Services, which includes the Food and Drug Administration. Soybean farmer Amanda Zalukich called the choice a middle finger to agriculture, which constituted a key piece of Trump's base. She says it's absolute danger to the American farm industry. He has gone as far as saying he would weaponize regulatory agencies to eliminate the use of pesticides. So basically, one of the few positive things that RFK Jr. stands for is what they're nervous about. That he might come down hard on pesticide companies, which, depending on the pesticide, not all of them, but depending on the pesticide, are giving Americans cancer.
Will someone please think of Monsanto, please, for once?
Yes, you've got Monsanto, which was bought by Bayer, but Bayer has continued to keep Roundup herbicide on the market, which causes cancer. And then they finally introduced their replacement to Roundup herbicide, and it apparently is, the studies have shown it might be 48 times more dangerous than Roundup. That's their new...
Lee, that was a completely perfect campaign of fixing the pesticides in Roundup.
That's how you fix them. You introduce this brand new. It's called Cancer Plus, and
yeah,
it's gonna make things all better.
We're having AI give you cancer now. It's totally streamlined.
But I just love that, like, this is perhaps some of the few positive things that RFK could actually bring if he were to be given the chance. And this is what NPR and Big Ag is most concerned about.
Hilarious.
Okay. One more story here. Which, again, good news, but good news that might not make you feel that good once you learn the reality of it.
All right, I like this pattern.
Yeah, you like this game? This is the game we're playing. The U.S. Navy has apologized 142 years after shelling and burning an Alaskan native village to oblivion.
Yeah, holy shit.
But they apologized.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't feel warm butterflies in my stomach. And I'm not...
No? You're just a negative person, Trevor.
I am. I'm more of a second half of the headline type of a guy, I guess.
I mean, this story is unbelievable. And of course, because we don't get real American history in this country, I've never heard of this or even anything connected to this campaign.
Yeah, I have never heard of this.
Shells fell on an Alaskan native village as winter approached, and the sailors landed in the town, burned what was left of the homes, food caches, and canoes. Conditions grew so dire in the following months that elders sacrificed their lives to leave more food for the children. This is in October 1882 in Angoon, a Tlingit village of about 420 people in the southeastern Alaska Panhandle. 142 later, the perpetrator of the bombardment, the U.S. Navy, has apologized.
Well, it's like my mom always said, right? As long as you say you're sorry, that's what's important.
As long as you say you're sorry, it fixes everything.
As long as you say you're sorry before 150 years, please.
But they they don't even really need the apology because in 1973, the Department of Interior gave them $90,000 in a settlement. So that also
the entire village.
The entire village.
My God.
Village leaders have for decades sought an apology as well, beginning each yearly remembrance by asking 3 times, is there anyone here from the Navy to apologize? The attack was one of a series of conflicts between the American military and Alaskan natives in the years after the U.S. bought the territory from Russia in 1867. So U.S. buys Alaska, a massive amount of land, and all these native people living in Alaska, for some odd reason, did not realize that they had been sold to the United States. Why is that? The U.S. Navy issued an apology last month for destroying the nearby village of Kaki in 1869, and the Army has indicated that it plans to apologize for shelling Wrangell, also in Southeast Alaska. So apparently this is a trend that they had in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s.
I love the announcement of a plan to apologize.
Yeah.
My God, could you do any less?
Today, Angoon remains a quaint village of about 420. So basically, after 140 years, they've gotten their numbers back to where they were. With colorful old homes, totem poles clustered in the west side of Admiralty Island, accessible by ferry or float plane in the Tongass National Forest. The residents are vastly outnumbered by brown bears, and the village in recent years has strived to foster its ecotourism industry. Bald eagles and humpback whales abound. Accounts vary as to what prompted its destruction, but they generally begin with the accidental death of a Tlingit shaman, Tith Klain. Klain was killed when a harpoon gun exploded on a whaling ship owned by his employer, the Northwest Trading Company. The Navy's version says tribal members forced the vessel to shore, possibly took hostages, which is denied, and in accordance with their customs, demanded 200 blankets in compensation. Well, the Navy can't possibly give 200 blankets, so.
And
the company,
to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't want blankets from the Americans in the first place.
No, I know. Yeah, there is an aspect there where I feel like the Alaskans had not heard what the blankets involved, but the company declined to provide the blankets and ordered the Tlingits to return to work. Instead, in sorrow, they painted their faces with coal tar and tallow. So apparently there's a tradition of painting their faces in sorrow, but the company thought that meant there was about to be an insurrection. Wow. So the company then calls a naval commander, the top U.S. official in Alaska, saying the Tlingit uprising threatened the lives and property of white residents. So they put on face paint to mourn the loss of their shaman, and then the Navy's called in to stop all this face painting garbage. Merriman arrived on October 25th and insisted the tribe provide 400 blankets by noon the next day as punishment for disobedience. Not only are we not giving you 200 blankets, we want 400 blankets. The Tlingits turned over 81 blankets. Maybe that was all they had. Merriman attacked, destroying 12 clan houses, smaller homes, canoes, and the village's food stores. Basically just burned the village to the ground. And 142 years later, they have now gotten to the population they were at 140 years ago. But they did get a sorry just now.
Yeah. Great.
You know, the U.S. government always does what's right 142 years later.
The U.S. government always does what's almost bare minimum 142 years later.
I mean, it's fucking insane. And I mean, on top of that, it's like the amount of money that the U.S. government and the U.S. military has, like $1 trillion, like they could give every one of those residents $1 million and not notice it. It'd be a rounding error. But of course, They can't do that.
That's like one of the most successful parts of like American propaganda is there's just the idea, like the concept of reparations as being like radical, where like any child could understand, like, bro, if someone like steals $10 from you, the way to make it right is to give them back $10. But somehow that concept is radical when it comes to like an entire population of people, right? We've all been convinced that reparations is something to scoff at when it's just like, basic ethics and morality.
Yeah, and the other thing is I think the U.S. government and the U.S. military knows that if they provide reparations for one group of victims, then there's a list of about 9 billion victims that they need to pay off. So
exactly.
All right, folks, I am going to wrap it up there, but thank you so much for joining us. I do these live streams Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Jaffer often joins me. Eleanor joins me on Fridays. I'll be back Thursday with another one. And, thank you for helping this show keep going. We face a ton of suppression. But you guys make it possible. I hope you'll join up at leecamp.net. I hope you'll check out the new free podcast, Just Comedy. Let me know what you think. And I also have Government Secrets tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, if you want to check out that show. And one more time, Jaffer, what's your TikTok?
Just search, Jaffer Khan, JAFFERKHAN. And you'll find it. But appreciate y'all being here. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jaffer.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. And thanks for all the kind words. Glad people like the background. I don't know. I'll keep switching it up. I'll find one I want to stick with eventually, I think. But who knows? Also, if you prefer podcasts or you're in the car and you want to catch up on the show, this is also a podcast. It's called The Lee Camp Show on Spotify. It's called Moment of Clarity on other platforms. I'll see you tomorrow for Government Secrets and Thursday for Dangerous Ideas. Keep fighting.
Well, brother, I salute you, though, man. You're one of the few that bring together this tremendous artistic talent and still be in such deep solidarity with oppressed people.
It's an honor to be here because I'll tell you, Lee, you have one of the funniest shows on television, bar none.
It's an enormous pleasure to be here. While I was waiting, I was leafing through your wonderful book.
The same to you. I love your show. Be happy to come back anytime.
Lee, this is one of the great honors of my long career, just to be in the same earth with you.
I'm sure.
We're just so blinded. We have so many blinders on because our society doesn't want us to know things. And so it takes shows like your show, and
it is clearly designed to eradicate.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, Jill, how are you? Julian, thanks for joining me. Honor to have you, brother.
Consumerism is a theory that people should behave this way to help each other. It's not.
Mr. George Galloway, thank you so much for joining me in these dark times.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me on. Keep fighting. Ha ha.